Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. What impact on costs and prices, if any, have this government's policies had on New Zealanders?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, in April the government increased tobacco excise. This was strongly supported by the Labour Party, which said, and I quote, "This is a huge step forward in health promotion for all New Zealanders." From the 1st of July, a number of sectors, including liquid fossil fuels, came into the ETS. This is expected to have an impact on households of around about $3 a week, which I might add, Mr Speaker, is about half the cost of Labour's ETS. On 1 October, GST was increased to 15%, but people were more than compensated for this, increased by tax cuts and increases in benefits, super and working for families. The most important thing, however, to look at is the overall increase in prices across the economy. Inflation over the last year has been only 1.5%. The last time inflation was any lower than this was well back into 1999.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Question, Mr Speaker. When the Prime Minister said at the start of June, and I quote, "People will be better off, they just don't know it yet," end quote, does he think the 16.4% increase in the price of fruit and vegetables over the last year is making families feel better off?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, well, firstly, it's worth noting that food prices rose 2.2% in the quarter. Secondly, actually, it's been interesting to note how many people have actually been remarking on their tax cuts and how much money they've had, and in fact, how easily the switch and rebalancing of the economy has gone from a slight increase in GST to a reduction in personal taxes. But of course, if the member wants to campaign on reversing GST and increasing personal taxes, he should go ahead and do so.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Order.
Mr Speaker,
the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Is he aware of last month's report from the Ministry of Health that states that only a third of New Zealand children are eating enough fruit and vegetables to be healthy? If so, how does he think the 16.4% increase in those goods over the last year are going to help children eat more healthy food?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I haven't actually seen the report, but I certainly would encourage parents to give their children fruit and vegetables. What I would say is, while it's not my responsibility to apologise on behalf of the previous Labour government, I was shocked to learn that fruit and vegetable prices went up 21% in the last 2 years of a Labour government, contrasted by 12%, even including GST, and that is a tragic set of circumstances.
Chris Tremain.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, how does the current level of inflation compare with that in recent years?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, at 1.5%, the current rate of inflation is very low compared to the period between 2000 and 2008. Price growth in New Zealand is well and truly under control. And this is a stark contrast, I might add, to the position when in September of 2008, annual inflation was running at 5.1%. Members will recognise that 5.1% under Labour is much higher than 1.5% under National.
The Honourable Jim Anderson.
Mr Speaker, is the Prime Minister aware that the real GDP per capita in constant prices and constant purchasing power parities between Australia and New Zealand closed by around 0.5% in each of the first 6 years of the Labour-led government from 1999 to 2005, but has widened by over 0.5% in each of the 2 years there's been a National-led government? And if he is aware of that, why does he believe that that is the situation when he has promised to close the gap?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I haven't seen that data, but what I have seen is a data that shows a lot less New Zealanders are going to Australia, and I've certainly seen the data which shows real incomes narrowing actually between New Zealand and Australia.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, does he support the statement by his Minister of Health that after the 6.5% increase that he approved in doctors' visit fees last year, a further increase of only $1 this year would be permissible because of GST?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, what I do support is the extra subsidies that went into GP visits to help people in the most low-income and vulnerable communities. What I support is the $14 billion plus of expenditure that's going into the health system. What I do support is the relentless focus the Minister has had on moving resources from the back office to the front office. What I do support is the way that the Minister is trying to get greater productivity in the health system. I certainly support the recommendation he received about neurosurgery between Dunedin and Christchurch. And, Mr Speaker, overall I support the tremendous efforts he's making to improve health in New Zealand.
Tremain.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister. Given that increasing GST has lifted prices, how easy would it be to reverse the government's GST income tax switch?
The Right Honourable Prime
Well, Mr
Minister.
Speaker, funnily enough, it would be very straightforward to reverse the tax switch. Reversing it would be, for instance, far easier than taking GST off fruit and vegetables, which require pages of rules and armies of bureaucrats to administer. Reversing the tax switch would be quite simple, relatively simple. All the Labour Party would need to do is take down GST, put up personal taxes, cut benefits, cut superannuation and get back on the bus.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, if the Minister of Health said that it was okay for doctors' fees to go up by only 1% because of GST, by $1 I should say, how does he explain the increases of up to $7.50 a visit recorded today in the Mana electorate since the 1st of April? That takes the fee of going to the doctor with your children up to $42.50 a visit.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, as I said, many people in Mana in very low-cost access practices have been getting extra subsidies. I can't talk about individual cases, but Mr Speaker, frankly, with about 5 days to go, I'm not surprised Phil Goff's had to wade in because, quite frankly, the people in Mana, all they know is they know Chris Farfoy's done a pretty hopeless job, albeit he's had 10,000 billboards out there.
Rahui Katane.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Supplementary to the Prime Minister.
Order. I apologise, Honourable Member. Now, look, I just cannot hear the questions being asked accurately at all, so I can't assist members if they don't believe their question's been answered. And that's not fair to the people asking questions. And it's all round the House. There's no particular party that's to blame here. The whole House is far too noisy during the asking of questions. Rahui Katane.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Supplementary to the Prime Minister. What has been the impact on the government's policies in addressing the poverty of many New Zealanders as a result of the assessment from the United Nations that New Zealand was rated as having the 6th greatest gap between rich and poor among developed nations last year?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, well, the government is working very hard to try and close that gap. And if one looks across the range of different policies that the government has been implementing, whether it's whānau ora or national standards to try and lift literacy and numeracy skills, or the 90-day trial periods which give people an opportunity to work, or the 17.5% tax rate that three-quarters of New Zealanders face, all of these things will help. But we need to recognise we're in difficult times and we do need to do our best, and the government is working on those issues.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
If New Zealanders are overwhelmingly better off after his tax switch, as he has promised, how does he explain the statements from Baycorp and from Vader Advantage that recently there has been a massive increase in the number of New Zealanders unable to pay their bills?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the same way I did last week or the week before when I answered that question, that is that there's always a lag effect. But interestingly enough, if one was to look hypothetically at the number of defaults that are taking place at the moment, then in contrast that back to 1991, 1992, the advice I've had is it's about a quarter of 91 to 92. So a lot of New Zealanders, yes, it's been difficult times for them, but they're very fortunate, I would suggest, to have the policies we have which are helping them through it.
The Honourable Jim Anderton.
Mr Speaker, As the table prepared by the OECD on national accounts, that I'll seek leave to table, will show the gap